everybody. Welcome to Shakespeare in Detroit's podcast, the Power 15, but for the purposes of this episode, it's going to be a Power Hour. And the reason we have extended the time for this particular episode is because it is inspired by Mental Health Awareness Month, which is the month of May that we're currently in. I thought it might be beneficial for someone, hopefully in our audience, that may have perhaps struggled during COVID-19 like I did, having lost someone very important in my life, and other people who just maybe need to have affirmation that they're not alone in the world when it comes to mental health issues that can run the gamut. For me, it's grief and what I like to call functional depression, because I still get up every day and go to work and do all the other things that I'm required to do or that I've agreed to do, or other challenges, which may include depression that may be debilitating, which I've also personally experienced in my life, also self-harm and other things. But this is going to be an organic conversation between myself and Morgan Breon, who is Shakespeare in Detroit's audiences. You probably recognize her because she is a star and has has lit up many of our shows, like The Merchant of Venice. She was our Shylock. She's also appeared in Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet, and another show that I don't often mention, but Julius Caesar. It's not because of Morgan. We love all of our shows.
And The Tempest.
And The Tempest. She was our Ariel in The Tempest. So Morgan has been a light in several of our productions. And she's here with us today, but we're not going to put on a show on Zoom today. We're going to talk, even though Shakespeare is here, there he is. We're going to talk, we're hopefully going to have a really authentic conversation. I have some questions and some things I'm going to bring up in the conversation, but Morgan and I are friends. So this is going to be a conversation between two friends speaking in eyes. You know, I have experienced this, or I am experiencing this. And again, hopefully it's inspiration for somebody out there who is going through it. Cause I am. But Morgan, I want to give you a little bit about Morgan, because she is amazing. So you know about the work she's done with Shakespeare in Detroit, but she's a multi-hyphenate person. Morgan holds 4 degrees. 4 from the University of Michigan, that's in Ann Arbor. And so that means she has a LLMSW, EDMA, a BA, and then another BA in English, y'all. So this is a person, again, who's a multi-hyphenate person. She has lots of experience in theater with a lot of different theaters, including Shakespeare in Detroit. And most recently, she performed in a play that she wrote called The Witch for Theater Nova. You can find out more about that on HealBeLive's website, because she's also a founder. She's the founder of HealBeLive. That's HealBe live, live.com. And that's also the place where you can purchase a t-shirt like the one that I have, one that says HealBeLive. And you can learn more. You're going to learn more about the organization as we talk. But Morgan, what I think is the beauty and the inspiration behind what she does, I think she's the thought leader when it comes to integrating the arts with wellness, specifically mental wellness, in the state of Michigan. So I have a pioneer on the line with me, and she's also the author of a book that was recently released at the end of 2020 called A Refugee of Me, and it has a workbook that also goes along with the book of poetry that she compiled, work that she created since she was a child, and this workbook has been an incredible resource for me in my grief, which we'll talk more about. So yeah, let's welcome Morgan Breon to the Power Hour.
Hello. Hi, Sam White. Thanks for having me.
So Morgan, there was a lot to share about you, because you are a dynamic person. So thank you for being on the Power Hour with us. And I wonder, because I sort of just touched on HealBeLive, but can you give people a little bit more of a robust description of what HealBeLive is?
Sure, absolutely. It's my pleasure. So as Sam mentioned, I founded a company called HealBeLive in 2017. It's a for-profit company that uses art to facilitate conversations in communities. We aim to create or use art to create lower risk entry points into conversations that are more safe, more action oriented, and then also entertaining. And that's because in my experiences, I'm trying to advocate for mental, emotional well-being. Sometimes people don't just want to sit down and, respond openly to the question of, so what trauma are you dealing with? But when you put something on a stage, when you present something in a way that gives everyone a shared reference point, then people are only charged to respond with their reactions to that stimulus in that moment. So, He'll Be Lived, the title and the mission kind of came from the Holy Spirit. I'm a pretty spiritual person, and the essence of it is in order to live, you must first be. In order to be, you must first heal. Heal, be, live. And so the idea is that each of these are different phases that take place individually and collectively, but we have the ellipses, which is to continuously be in process, which means you don't ever reach perfection and you shouldn't strive to. It's always about making progress. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty much
And I
a
love
short
that
version.
I love that you said, Morgan, it's not about perfection. And I want to just lift that up because I think, unfortunately, sometimes in our current society, perfection is an expectation for people to always do the right things and always say the right things. And I
Yeah,
want to share
yeah,
again that this is a conversation between two imperfect people who by no
yes,
means are perfect. And certainly I'll speak in eyes. I am not perfect. And I think Morgan would agree in her
yeah,
human beingness.
yeah,
So we might not always say the perfect things and we might not always do the perfect things, but we are striving, as Morgan said, for progress. And just in keeping progress with
right.
this conversation, I want to, and because we're talking about, talking in eyes, which is, I think, respecting our individual sovereignty, each other's sovereignty, and the sovereignty of anybody who's listening, I want to give a brief digital land acknowledgement. As we are currently in Detroit or Southeast Michigan, which is the land of the Anishinaabe. And we gather today in an effort to speak about our personal experiences in mental health in a new digital format using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. This technology, which has now become central to our daily lives, leaves a significant footprint and contributes to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous people. Although we're here together virtually, separated by distance in our geographic location, which again is Detroit or the land of the Anishinaabe, we all sit on indigenous land once occupied and inhabited by hundreds of native tribes, land stolen from these indigenous people by European settlers. The genocide and forced removal of indigenous people from these lands is a history that must be acknowledged, and the current struggles of indigenous people must be brought to the forefront so that their plight is never forgotten. And I always like to say, as stolen people, as a Black person on stolen land, I always want to make sure that we start conversations, even in the digital format, and acknowledge our Indigenous brothers and sisters who are important to
Absolutely.
our plight and our journey here in the United States of America. So,
I had to reel it in. I almost said amen. So I said absolutely.
so
It's a
Morgan, a
refugee.
refugee of me, which is available like this T-shirt on HealBeLive.com. Yes, could you hold up yes, there it is. Could you hold up the book by itself real quick? Just
Here's the book.
the
Mhm.
so that book is a collection of poems since you were how old, and sort of what inspired you to
Since I was
compile them?
since I was 11,
Mhm.
the first poem in the book, well, the second poem in the book is what was written when I was 11 years old in sixth grade, and really, this came about during the pandemic, 2020. I just felt like I was in a lot of different spaces, professionally, personally, where my voice was being mocked a lot. And I've said this before, people saying, why do you take so long to say stuff? Or just spit it out? Or like, you don't make any sense when you're talking. And a friend of mine, we were kind of going on this healing journey together. And she said, I just heard of this gospel artist who just released an album in the pandemic called The Lost Files. There were songs that he wrote that he just never released. And she's like, I feel like you have all these poems. You should just put them together and just, make a book, just to kind of like combat this mocking of your voice. So originally I intended to just put all the poems together just to prove that like I have an eloquent voice, I have a unique voice, and I have something to say. I've long had something to say, and I just planned on printing one book. But then as I sent it to people to just look at it and tell me what they thought, people were like, okay, can I get a copy of this? Do you mind if when you finish this? And I was like, okay, well, let me go all out. Let me actually look at what it might take to really put some unique energy around that. And that's kind of when the idea of including commentary came about. And then as I was working on it, I linked up with a book consultant named Candace Long, who really kind of helped me see the greater impact that it could have. And that's kind of when I was like, okay, I need to really put a lot of intentionality behind this. And then the Holy Spirit just kind of gave this idea along with other people's ideas of like, why don't you put commentary in the book? And with that, I started seeing these activities because I was like, I'm covering a lot of heavy material. I'm talking about depression. I'm talking about my struggle with spirituality. I'm talking about my experiences with racism in high school. I don't want to just leave people with that, having had some backgrounds in social work. And so Holy Spirit, God gave me this idea to create a workbook and gave me just downloaded activities. Downloaded activities. I just smacked myself in the face. Downloaded activities to go along with the poem. So this workbook, because I just felt like it would be too long to put all of them in, and you don't want it to be overwhelming, but he gave me like 50 activities. This workbook is 62 pages and it only has 6 fleshed out activities. So as we move on, as we continue on, I'll release more and more workbooks to talk about more and more poems, but that's how we got here.
And if you read the A Refugee of Me, the actual compilation of all of Morgan's poems, you really do learn a lot about you. I mean,
Yeah.
even though like I know you, and have
Yeah.
known you for some years, I feel like if a complete stranger
Mhm.
read the book, they would learn a lot about who Morgan is and
Yeah.
who you've been, because they start, from the time that you were 11. It's very difficult for a lot of people, I imagine, to be so bold
Yeah.
to share their feelings, their experiences with even another person. What gave you I know you mentioned Holy Spirit, but what gave you was it Holy Spirit, in fact, that gave you the agency, the strength, and the inspiration to be so vulnerable for everybody to read, you know?
Good question. Good question. I've always, the reason that I actually started writing poetry and acting actually was because I didn't feel like there was a lot of spaces for me to really express myself. I just didn't feel like, because I became depressed at the age of 12, started self-harming at 12. And at the time, I just feel like, the people around me just didn't know what to do with that. And so when I would write poems, again, this is why I say like that art is lower risk. I could talk about these issues that I was dealing with, and people were more apt to listen because it was kind of coming in this creative format. When I got on stage, I was able to kind of express or push into some of these emotions that I was feeling, but I just didn't feel like there was space for me to express them in real life. So I've always just used art as a way to be vulnerable. So that wasn't the hard part. In the book, I quote like my hallmark scripture, which is 2 Corinthians 1, which is God of all comfort. And I remember coming upon that passage of scripture at some point in my life. And basically the idea is that you go through something because you experience the comfort of God to go through that moment. And then you know what it's like to be comforted through that experience. So when you come or cross paths with someone who's going through a similar experience, you now know what that feels like, and you now know what it feels like to be comforted, and you can offer that. And so I believe in the power of your testimony. And I felt like, how can I encourage people to enter into conversation about themselves and honest conversation about their feelings if I'm not willing to take that plunge first? So I, I
Yeah.
just put it out there, and and I put that in the book in one of the commentaries as well, as this like, I get pleasure knowing that someone can read my stories and say like, oh, I see myself in you. I see
Mhm.
myself in that. Let's talk. Nothing's off the table. I put it all out there so you know what you can approach me about,
Yeah.
or so.
Mhm. And what is, because I don't know if I don't know, and maybe they do, but in the case that they don't, what exactly is self-harm? Like if someone watches this or listens to this and they say, well, what does that mean? Because self-harm can have sort of it can feel like it has a huge definition. What can that mean? Or what did it mean in your case, specific self-harm?
Right. And I would invite people to research it, um, to kind of gain meaning for themselves, because I don't want to pretend as if what I offer is the end all be all. It's a term that's used interchangeably with like self injury, a lot of other terms, and really it can take on many different forms. For me, self harm was, um, I used to well, I won't say the method that I use, but basically I would get very overcome with emotion. And like you hear people say, like with depression, or anxiety, like I can't pinpoint it. If I could pinpoint it, then we wouldn't be having this problem. Like, it's just, I just feel lost, I feel confused, I feel overwhelmed, I feel sad, I don't know why. And I just hurt, and I don't have any rhyme or reason for it. And so I just found myself like in those dark spaces a lot, and I just felt helpless. And so I would use methods to harm my physical self, because it would become a distraction, right? It's like, okay, now there's actual evidence of hurt, and I can fixate on that hurt, because now what feels like it exists inside of me is somewhat outside of me. But the problem is that eventually that scars, and if it fades, maybe, and then you still haven't, or I still hadn't resolved what was going on inside of me. So, um,
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Morgan. And I just want to say, and thank you again for speaking in eyes. And everybody will hear me saying this over and over again. But
yeah.
our one of the things that I love about Morgan that she always talks about is that our experiences are our own, which is why Morgan and I are continually speaking in eyes. And again, hopefully someone can find something in there maybe that listens to this that they identify with, that lets them know that they're not alone. But every experience, just like every individual and every fingerprint, is different. And so that's why we
Yes.
continue to speak in eyes. And I want to say, Morgan, one of the things that I admire about you is your willingness to be vulnerable. Because I'm gonna give a confession here. For a long time, like especially one of my closest friends who works at Shakespeare in Detroit, who works with me at Sid, would call me Robo Sam because because I took pride in turning off
Hmm.
like emotions to get whatever needed to be done at Shakespeare in Detroit done, and became quite the expert in what I call eliminating the vulnerability. And I think,
Hmm.
and I can only speak in eyes, right? But I think I do perceive other women leaders doing the same thing, even if they aren't as
Mhm.
honest about, being eliminators of the vulnerability. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I think in my observation, I believe that it can be what society has placed on us as being strong Black women, which is another reason I'm so
Mhm.
excited to talk to another
Mhm.
Black woman. Cicely Tyson, in an interview with Gayle King once, she said that there were four rungs on a ladder, and
Yeah.
Black women are the last rung, and on top you have Black men on the third rung stepping on them. On the second rung you have white women stepping on, everybody below them, and above everybody you have white men. And it's all this constant pressure again happening on that fourth rung, which is Black
Mhm.
women. And so, we often are the leaders of movements like the Black Lives Matter movement or the Me Too movement, but you rarely, bringing things back to theater, do you see us the object of affection in a love story. Rarely do you see us being literally swept off our feet in in an amazing, tale of romance, because we're always charged with leading something and being really strong, And
Yeah.
so I wondered, because I don't think there's a lot of cultural references about, or Black women speaking about mental health. I just wonder,
Mhm.
like, and you sort of talk, you bring your vulnerability to acting, like Shylock in The Merchant of Venice was brilliant because of his vulnerability. But I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on, because you work with students all the time, is that just sort of an innate thing that you have to constantly nurture to remain vulnerable and share your
Well,
experiences, or why does it, do you think, get bogged down for some Black women?
I think if I may, because you said something, it wasn't until the book launch that people started like complimenting my vulnerability, and I was just like, I don't really feel like I'm that vulnerable. And I think that maybe because vulnerability is something that is kind of connoted with like this scariness, right? Because vulnerability feels like you're having to kind of like expose yourself outside of, beyond your comfort level to I don't know what the end goal is, but it's like you're stepping outside of your comfort zone. And for me, to me, I it resonates for me as transparency. Um, and I think I feel the charge to be transparent because I'm constantly inviting people into spaces of authenticity, like with my students, like I don't feel like it's me being vulnerable, telling them about my self-harm. I feel like you may need access to healing. I've had experiences having to access healing and also feeling as if I couldn't talk about it or didn't have the resources. Like, I'm inviting you to be authentic about where you are. So I feel like I need to take that first step. And so I guess to me, the end justifies the means, right? But it's interesting. Like, I don't really feel like this doesn't feel vulnerable to me. It doesn't feel vulnerable to me to share my story as a sacrifice for people to be able to have authentic conversation. Now it feels vulnerable to, like in a romantic situation, like to like offer offer these pieces that are still not resolved or whatnot. But this is I just want to it's and I don't know what that means, but it doesn't feel vulnerable. And maybe I'm hoping to kind of dismantle the fear of that, because I feel like that's why, I wrote on there silent suffering. Like, I'm really trying to come against this phenom of silent suffering. Like, it's really just an exchange of stories. Like, and if at least one person out there has gone through this, then and then you see people, and that's why, you talk about, and I'm going to transition into this Black woman in America thing, seeing people's stories, their real stories, their authentic stories exist in the world. I think gives people more permission to share their own. When
Mhm.
I in the work that I've been doing, where I tell someone, just give me a piece of your story and let me play it back to you. They're like, wow. A young lady in the audience said that's my unique story. Like, I know I'm special, I know I'm important, but when I saw a piece of it on stage, and then another woman said, and then I saw people responding to my story, either positively or having an emotional reaction to it, like, okay, it's okay for me to share. It's okay for me to talk. And so I guess I've been blessed with, like, this doesn't feel vulnerable. Like, maybe sharing one on one and hoping that you'll receive what I'm saying is more vulnerable, but that doesn't feel vulnerable to me.
Yeah, and see, that's why you just totally demonstrated why I think that you're a unicorn because I feel extremely uncomfortable. I'm not gonna even like lie to everybody. Like I prefer to like go over the details of a Excel sheet or read a
Hmm. Hmm.
script and be the director, and direct other people, actors, to be vulnerable or
Hmm.
to sort of give themselves to this character. I'd rather be
Yeah.
sort of doing that, sitting in a chair or standing up or however I feel like directing, depending on what's happening with my feet on
Yeah.
any given day. But I'd
Yeah.
rather do that
Yeah.
than the other side of it. And I think in my sort of perspective is I see more Black women not being vulnerable than I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
seeing women who act and live their lives as you do. I mean, I see a lot of great
Yeah.
Black women who are actors, but when it comes to sort of
Yeah.
their personal lives and being able to write a book of poetry that talks about, being a young person self-harming or being depressed or, questioning your relationship
Yeah.
with God as you do, in a refugee of me and trying to find your way to this,
Yeah.
back to them. And I don't know. It's just I don't see that often. And that's why I think, this workbook was such a game changer for me, which I'll talk about a little more in a bit. But I see the opposite. I don't know anything, and I'm just bringing them up because they're such impactful.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the personal lives of the Black women who started Black Lives Matter. I don't know anything personal about the amazing Black queen that started the Me Too movement.
And I think that maybe deep down, that's, I think I take the position of the reason that I'm encouraging people to tell their stories is because no one is the expert of that outside of you. If anyone tries to stand against that, it's like, yeah, but who are you? Like, you don't know. Like, this is my, and taking ownership of, like, I feel like, so there was a play that I wrote called Black Women in America. It's called Telling Our Stories, Black Women in America.
Mhm.
And basically, I interviewed 20 women, Black women in America, 72 hours worth of material, and compiled it into this play. And these women really struggled to just feel like whatever they had to offer was good enough. It was like you could see them trying to like polish what they were saying, and the moments that I zeroed in on were the ones where they were, where they had the ums and the uhs and the what, and again, like I said, playing it back to them and showing them, do you see how beautiful, how honest, how rich it is when you're just being
Mhm.
yourself? And so I guess I'm saying that to say, like, no one can take that away from you. We spend a lot of our time as Black women, or I have, and at least my experiences with these women, responding to everything that's going around us. We are always reacting, always nurturing, always showing up to be of service to someone else. So when we're asked to just be, you know,
Yeah.
that seems very difficult. It seems very taxing. It's like, where does that start? Where does that end? And so I feel like when you start with yourself, when you start with your story, and you push more into that, like, the more solid you get in, the more solid I'm getting into that. Like I'm able to start shifting things around in a way that's more beneficial to me, or I'm able to enter into more spaces and be aware of what I need in order to protect my peace in the
Mm.
midst of that. I'm trying to shift that conversation away from like what's going on here and how to like no like that these situations may occur. What do you need in any given moment, knowing what you know about yourself to be sustained, to be maintained?
That's right.
And not being a thermometer, but being a thermostat. You're changing the atmosphere of that environment. You're not constantly, because how do you get to thrive in who you are if you're constantly attuning yourself to the trauma of, to the experiences of, to the thoughts of, to the feelings of everybody else around you? So
Yeah.
that's why it's like I want to empower people to really push into their stories, you know.
Yeah. And I definitely have to say that a refugee of me does that. Now, I will say,
Yeah.
like, I'll speak, again, speaking in eyes, um, and I was talking about Black women sort of being more vulnerable,
Hmm.
and again, I'm only speaking about my perception and my experience. I think looking inward, I realized that I didn't want to perpetuate that for anybody looking at me.
Hmm.
Where like, somebody would call me Robo Sam because they don't really know who I
Hmm.
am outside of William Shakespeare,
Yeah.
you know. And so that meant for me, for me, it had to start with actually it had to start outwardly. It started by me becoming a bodybuilder. It
Hmm.
started outwardly with me going, okay, I'm gonna build up these physical muscles and literally channel all my weight outwardly by putting it on
Hmm.
barbells, dumbbells, or whatever I'm lifting, bricks.
Hmm.
I lift all kind of stuff. And then hopefully
We
that
do water
trans
bottles,
water bottles,
water jugs,
doesn't matter, as long as
everything.
it's furniture, as
Everything.
long as it's heavy. And that worked. So 2 years ago, I started working out, and eventually, because I was at the same time taking care of both my parents. Just to give people context, my father, who is the person I lost in 2020, had Parkinson's disease, and my mother has a form of cancer. I'm not going to give details, but has a form of cancer. And so I was taking care of both of them simultaneously. And I was glad that I started working out because I needed to be physically stronger. But what also
Yeah.
happened is those weights cracked open my heart,
Mm.
because I felt like I was getting more confident in my body, and within my body was this heart, this mind, this soul that also wanted to, build up its muscles and build up
Mm.
its sort of agency in the world. And that's what happened. And so I started, even on social media, my posts became a little bit more vulnerable, and
Yeah.
I started talking to people about how I was really feeling, like Morgan, like you, and
Yeah.
my handful of other friends, and telling people how I really felt about things. And then my work started changing because as a director, I started working from a place of wellness. If I'm well, the actors will be
Yeah.
well. And if I make sure the actors are well, then, the production is going to benefit because of that. And so,
Can I
yeah.
just want to affirm something that you just said though, and invite that into the conversation of that storytelling or being vulnerable or being honest or authentic doesn't always come in this format, right? Like I see you taking that principle on, you saying, this is where I'm at in my journey. I want to build up my body. And sharing that was a form of you, like you said, being vulnerable and telling your story. And in that, I saw people, I referred people to your, like, go watch so and so because they start, and, hyping you up or rooting you on or saying, okay, Sam's doing, okay, I can do that. Or seeing that you got more and more serious. I remember you telling me that one of your family members was asked you for a workout, and you were like, they don't ever ask me for a workout. And so as you became more honest about where you were and where you wanted to go, people took that serious and you became the expert of your journey, and people bought into that. So I just wanted to say that. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's what happens. It's like you said, when you're um transparent, I think even though everybody's experience is different, it does
Yes.
inspire them, encourage them, motivate them to do the same. And even when I look at sort of these really like powerful Black women in our field and in our industry, the first thing I think of now when I see them is I wonder what, like I'm thinking about their wellness. What's your blood pressure? When's the last time you were when's the last time you were on vacation? Like I
Yeah.
literally think that. And that's another reason I was so excited about having this conversation. And then I also wonder, like, do they have a Morgan in their life to talk to? You know, do they have a,
Mhm.
you know, my sort of other people that I have in my life? But I wanted to also point out that I do think that practical resources are important too, which takes me
Yes.
back, which takes me back to a refugee of me, the
The workbook.
workbook, which is something that I've been able to do. I finished the whole book, but there's one exercise in particular that we're going to end with that I just did
Yeah.
this morning that I think other people might want to see an example of. But resources like this, and also this was another book that sort of helped me in my grief. And when I say grief, I'm talking about the loss of my father, who I just referred to. It's today has been 6 months since my dad passed away, 6 months exactly. And I want to acknowledge for anybody else who may have, Morgan, in 2020 lost somebody to
Yeah.
COVID-19. My father didn't pass from COVID-19, but who may
Yeah.
have lost somebody to COVID-19 in 2020 or lost somebody, period, last year or any
Yeah.
year, that grief doesn't just go away. You know, I think people
Yeah.
think,
And
oh,
that
it's
that loss could be from a passing or just a separation. We learn in social work that every separation is a trauma.
That's
So,
right. And it doesn't just go away. I think people think, like they say, whoever they is, that time heals all wounds, and it sort of changes the wound. I think the wound
yeah.
is maybe it's not as bloody, as it was
Hmm.
before, but it's still there. And like practical resources like the workbook, and people have given me all sorts of books since my dad passed away.
Yeah.
This one is Prayers of Honoring Grief.
Mm.
The other one that I showed was Words to Heal the Heart of the Death of a Father, which is specific to
Mm.
I think daddy's girls, and I was definitely a daddy's girl. But I wonder, Morgan, because Morgan and I'm going to give you all full disclosure. Morgan acknowledged her spirituality, and I'm going to acknowledge that when I discuss my spirituality, I talk about God in the Bible. So even if it's something that you aren't, maybe you don't consider yourself a Christian, or maybe you don't consider yourself someone who reads the Bible, maybe you read the Quran or the Torah. I think you can still find this information that I want to talk
Principle.
about a little bit, yeah, inspirational. And so I wanted to ask you, Morgan, I guess I hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
Hmm.
Is there a scripture that you sort of that you go to, that's sort of your favorite scripture, or it just sort of lights up your day or brings you peace or joy or anything that you want to share? Is there any scripture? If not, then I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but is there one?
No, I mentioned the one in the book, 2 Corinthians 1, but I'll say a shorter one because that's like a whole passage. That brings me comfort because, like I said, it's a reminder that, and this is the caveat of the book, no pain is ever wasted. You know,
Yeah.
and that's why I love the story of Joseph, which I also reference in the workbook, because you see in the story of Joseph that no pain is ever wasted. But Philippians 1:6 says, God will carry out to completion the work that He started in you. I also worship the God in the Bible until the coming of Jesus Christ. So it's like whatever good thing God started in you, like He's gonna make sure He finishes it. So like wherever I am on my journey right now, I know that there are good things that have been started in me, and I know that they're gonna be carried out, and that is giving me a lot of peace, as well as 2 Corinthians 4. I don't remember the exact, but it says we are hard pressed on every side,
Mm,
but not crushed. We are confused, but not in like disarray. Like there's there's constant pressure, but we're not destroyed. And
mm,
it's just a reminder that yeah, like you said, the God that I serve has never promised that life would be easy. It's just that uh, it would be worth it. That I wouldn't be alone in it, and that I wouldn't be destroyed by it. I would be an overcomer. So
Yeah, and I think when you read A Refugee of Me, I'm talking to all the people that I hope buy the book and invest in this amazing local artist. When you read the book and buy the accompanying workbook, you'll
yeah.
you'll see that Morgan is a testament to the constant pressure of life, but not being destroyed. And I feel like, and thank you for sharing that scripture. That's definitely something that I can relate to, because I'm not going to
Yes.
get into the gory details of my grieving process, because that's literally for just me and my close personal friends to know.
Mhm.
But I will say, sort of the thing that I am hopeful about is someone who's currently, again, I feel like I'm in a functional depression because I miss my daddy.
Yeah.
I just miss him. um
Yeah.
I realize that I'm still here, and even though I miss him like crazy, I didn't know you could yearn for somebody at this level.
Hmm.
I'm not destroyed, but I also have to say, I think one of the things that is also important for anybody who may be sort of experiencing self-harm or going through any sort of mental health challenge or issue or cognitive sort of hurdle or grief is the capacity of friendships. I think through grieving, I've really learned the importance of a good friend like Morgan, and three other people in my life who I consider my nice safe circle. And that's also in the Bible. And I wanted to share this scripture for, again, anybody who just wants some inspiration. You don't have to, like, if you want to open
Yeah.
the Bible and read it. But if not, I mean, the Bible is a universal I think, meditation for everybody to sort of take into account every day. This scripture it speaks to me about Morgan and a couple of my other friends who have been incredible the past few months. It's Proverbs 17:17,
Hmm.
and it reads, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." So if anybody out there, especially like a teenager, a teen that's going,
Wow.
if there's like a teen in high school or middle school, because I was also pretty depressed in middle school, just going through the changes of
Hmm.
becoming a young woman from a kid, and you're wondering, do I have any friends? Think
Hmm.
about those people in your life who weren't just there to ride, in the limo with you, but who truly got on the
Yeah.
bus with the muffler hanging out with
Yeah.
you. Like, those are the people you want to consider your friends.
Yeah.
And I also want to say to teens, nobody has a lot of friends. Anybody who tells you they have a lot of friends, no, they don't. No, they don't. You might in life have a handful of good friends. And if you're lucky, you have one. Because
Hmm.
right there, like, God tells you what a friend is. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. So if you want to know and you want to be able to identify who your friends are, then that's sort of that's what you need to know about friends. And yeah, Morgan, what were you
Yeah.
gonna say? You look like you're about to say something. What you say?
Well, because there is a poem in the book called "I've Broken Up with Friendship and It
Can you read
Feels
it? Can
Darn
you?
Feels yeah, I can read, and it feels darn good." And it was it was written my senior year of high school after I had a break in one of my friendships. Um, but I will say this, that what I have learned also is that sometimes there are areas of brokenness. There have been areas of brokenness in my life where I haven't been able to receive good friends too. And so just in that process of you talking about, like, you're not always going to have a lot of good friends around you. You're not going to always have a lot of friends around you. Making sure that I do that work in myself to make sure that when I can be a good friend, but that I can also receive good friends. So I'll read the book, I'll read the poem, but I wanted to say that in the workbook, there's an activity. Oh, you can't see it.
There it is.
Who's on your tree? And this was inspired by some Tyler Perry, and I get credit. I talked to an attorney and everything. I give him credit, just very inspired. But there's an activity where you really kind of map out, like how Sam was saying, like you see there's roots down here, and then there's branches, and then there's leaves, and that people in our lives exist, like Tyler Perry says in this thing, like for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. We've heard that, you know. And sometimes it's just what this activity offers you is to say like everybody shouldn't be thrown away, but it's helpful, and it again can protect your peace to know where to place people, because then you can temper your expectations
Mm.
appropriately, you know. Um,
Okay,
so
so
the poem reads
Morgan's gonna read. And the name of the poem again, Morgan?
is I've broken up with friendship and it feels darn good. And that's also in the workbook because that's the poem that inspires the activity. So, um, based on the actions of those we call friends, have we yet to see a true definition? With all the backstabbing, lies, and persistent gossip, maybe the past has only held hopeful premonitions. To be or not to be has always been the question. To be what? Alone or tantalized? Life shows singlehood as a better suggestion. I've longed to run from loneliness, but my fear has been unknown. And after friends, I've realized that the true fears of truth I do find when I'm on my own. I'll drink to that. I don't know what I was drinking. That was a nice go. To friendship, I say, fare thee well, you temporary user, you potential lifetime abuser. My heart has burst from continuous swell. More happiness is found in the pits of hello to the goodbye of affection. And I'm bigger than being infective. But jealousy and hypocrisy is the root of my objection to take no more. It's all done for. And concern is no longer the issue. And once a word becomes defined, all friends will realize that they've all clung tight to a lie. Now, there is commentary to talk about that because I was in a very unhappy space when I wrote that, and the commentary makes sure that whoever reads it doesn't like kind of end with that. But that is how I felt after feeling very betrayed. But also, I mentioned in the commentary that because of again my fear of being hurt, I wasn't mature enough to talk about or express how I felt hurt and give this person an opportunity to be a friend if that's what they wanted to choose to do. And so that's what I meant about like getting healed in those spaces, because sometimes in my life I have blocked people from showing up because I didn't trust that they could show up, or
Mm.
I didn't trust that they could or would show up the way that I wanted to. But in that, I also learned that if I tried to control the way people love me, then I also missed out on all these new and creative ways to be loved. So
Yeah, and I love that you said that, Morgan, because Morgan and I, just full disclosure, just as
I didn't know.
I've been on an emotional roller coaster in my grief process. So Morgan's talking to just the general audience, and but this is a conversation which he's personally had with me, right? And
Yeah,
I do want to just lift up that we also have to be our own friends, and finding those eternal
yeah,
resources which come from, to live you got to be you got to heal, and so to have sort of that full experience as a being, you have to be your own friend. And people say that all the
yeah.
time, and I used to be like, that's stupid, like I'm myself, so how can I also
Cliche.
right?
Get that out of here.
Is that cliche? But it's really the truth, and also, we desire certain things from other people, but I also have to ask myself, especially going back to
Hmm.
Proverbs 17:17, does someone feel that way about me?
Yes, exactly.
And not that it's tit for tat, but just, you want to be, who doesn't want to be a shoulder to cry on, a person to hug, a safe place for somebody to call and just totally be themselves. I had one of my students say, I just need a place where I can be myself and not be judged. And this was coming from
Yeah,
a teenager, but we all feel that same way, whether we're
yeah,
18 or 80. And so having
yep,
speaking of sovereignty, are we our own friend? Do we have the internal resources to be there for ourselves? So yeah,
yeah.
thank you for mentioning that, Morgan.
You're welcome. I wasn't trying to,
No, I
but
know
when the
that's
conviction goes out, it hits
no,
whoever it's supposed to hit.
no. It, this conversation could really be like 2 hours long because there's so
Yeah,
much to discuss around self-harm and depression or grief. So
wellness and yeah,
yeah, all of it. But I wanted to ask two questions, Morgan.
yes.
Is there anything about those things that you want to, lift up about self-harm or depression? And then bringing it back to eyes or you, what's your sort of dream for yourself now that we've, I guess, survived a quarantine period? How do you want to how do you want to reemerge in the world? So, how is there anything we left out about self-harm and depression that we need to lift up in this conversation? Obviously, not having enough time to discuss everything. And then,
Yeah.
how do you want to reemerge after this quarantine period? What's the dream for yourself?
Well, what I would lift up is one, it's okay that you don't feel okay. It's okay when you don't feel okay. And it's okay when that lingers. I invite people to ask a question of themselves of, do I want to stay this way? And maybe the answer to that is no, but you still don't know how to not stay that way. But do I want to stay this way? And do I'll say this. Um, and I'm trying to speak generally because I want to acknowledge that everybody's situation is very unique. Some people, they can hit rock bottom and bounce back. Some people, to others, what they go through may seem very minuscule, but it's very big to them, and we're all wired differently too. So I'm trying to keep it general enough where I'm not Xing someone out of the conversation, but also really saying something I feel is beneficial. What I want to say is that what's been helpful for me and what I invite others to do is to identify at least one. If you can at least identify at least one, but up to three minimum of people that you really feel like you could trust or that won't judge you. Um, don't suffer in silence. You know, just tell someone that you need help. Um, if you feel like you don't have that person, there are resources, and I know that Sam, I'm going to provide some to Sam, and she'll provide those. And we're not, I can, I'm not trying to speak for Shakespeare in Detroit, but Shakespeare in Detroit and HealBeLive, we are not mental health organizations. We're not endorsing these resources, but they are resources that are out there. And rather than someone having to try to scurry around and find them, we're going to provide a list to them, so that just to put that disclaimer out there. But I just want to say that, like if you're a high school student or if you are a college student, like there are resources on campus that you can go to where they will, give you, like even Detroit Way Mental Health, like you can call hotlines or talk space where you can get free sessions of therapy, like 12 free sessions of therapy. If you're a child and you're afraid of telling your parent, like they are contracted by law to give you 12 free sessions without, sharing. And then if you want to continue, you have to get that parental consent once you're like 16 or 14 or something or up. And so just not suffering in silence and understanding, like, if I go to therapy, I know many people who go to therapy. I love therapy. But also, like, that process is not cut and dry. And it's okay if you meet a person and you don't vibe with that person. Like, it's like, I don't go into the shopping mall and then like the first thing that I get, like I feel compelled to buy it. If it don't fit, it don't fit. I'm not gonna be forced to buy it. I'm not gonna feel, condemned if I don't buy it. And I think that I want to share with people that it's okay for that. Like, if you're that particular about what you put on your body, then you can be that particular about who you give access to your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, and it's okay. Like, I just don't want people to be discouraged if that process takes some time, because you are worth that process. You are worth figuring it out and having, like you said, practical tools. Like, I personally wanted to be have a therapist who was an older Black woman who I felt like had lived some life experiences. And when I was getting therapy, it wasn't like a peer-to-peer sort of situation, because I wanted to feel like I could also glean from their wisdom, you know. And that's what I got. And anything that didn't fit in that, and I had to go through like 4 or 5 people who fit that mold, but then it was like, okay, do we have kind of similar values? Can I show up fully? Can I talk about my spirituality? So I have a Christian counselor. So just, you know, dive into that process of self-healing, you know, with no limitations, and to do exactly what you need to do for yourself to get what you need and to not suffer in silence. In terms of me, what was the second question?
How do you personally want to reemerge from this quarantine period? What's your dream for
Awesome.
yourself? Yeah.
And with that, I want to offer, like, I had to, because I was exposed to family members who had COVID. Um, I had to quarantine for 14 days. And I want to offer this, like, that was really hard for me. Um, and I've been blessed enough to kind of have enough, you know, time to kind of like navigate different spaces during this quarantine. But I did spend a lot of the quarantine by myself. So I'm speaking from personal experience of like, it's hard to just be surrounded by yourself. Like, you know, I know people say like, you got to be able to get, like, I love myself. That's not the problem. But human interaction that, you know, now, like a young lady says, our bodies have been weaponized. I'm a hugger. I'm a physical touch. Like, and even like if you're a quality time person, like if that's your love language, like understand like you've been deprived of that. You know, you've been deprived of like that constant feed of words of affirmation or physical touch or the exchange of gifts, or, you know, being able to do things for people in a normal environment because of all these restrictions. So like our experiences of love and feeling cared for have been severely compromised during this time. And so I just want to validate that, you know. And so how I want to reemerge is one. I want to reemerge. That's for one. But I've had the opportunity during this current quarantine to really push into some things and ideas and causes that I really believe in, and like the WITCH, which stands for Wound Intervention Through Care and Healing. So when I can, I'm going to try to hit the ground running to get that and the conversation around trauma amongst Black youth into those spaces. The workbook now, the poems are available on an album that I released called The Classics, that you can find it on Amazon or iTunes or Spotify, and a bunch of other stuff that I don't know about, but, you know, the site hooked me up. You can go to our website, HealBeLive.com, to hear a preview of the album. There's another album on there that you can hear a preview on the On Faith section of the book. And I just want to create as many mediums as possible for people to access the work, and the mission, and to have as many conversations as possible, and to empower people to, you know, dismantle the fear around vulnerability, and and start with their own story.
Yeah, that's super important, and thank you for saying that. Because, like I said, this conversation could go on pretty much for
Yeah.
days, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so much to discuss when it comes to, I don't even have to call it mental health, just, life, especially
Wellness.
wellness, because all of us, no matter if we live in Detroit or Paris, yeah, I'm always gonna mention Paris, or jo- Johannesburg or Georgia, we've all had
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, we've all experienced this pandemic, and just experienced life in whatever way it's shown up for us. And yeah, the same sort of thing about the sort of grief space that I want to lift up is that I suspect that I'll be grieving for the rest of my life. I just suspect it, because I mean, my dad was with me for 30 plus years, so I imagine I'm just gonna just miss him forever.
Yeah.
Um, and so anybody that's grieving, and maybe it's been a year or two or three for you, and you're like, oh, why do still some days I wake up, in tears? You lost a human, you lost someone really special to you. And I want to validate that experience and let you know you'll probably always be in it, but that you are not alone. There's others who feel you, know maybe not exactly what you're going through, but have a pretty good idea. You're not alone. And there are resources like, for me, it's the Bible and God, but it's also my friends. It's also hitting the gym and getting it in with the barbells or the dumbbells. So find that resource for you to, maybe physically and spiritually and mentally and emotionally sweat it out and be able to sort of just make it and take it day to day, because every day is different. Mondays never look the same as Tuesdays, and
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing for people, because I really didn't talk about it a lot, but I'm grieving my father, but I was also a caregiver, and that's a really specific experience. And I know a lot of people define caregiving in many different ways, and I'm not like putting an X on that or invalidating that. But when I say caregiver, I'm talking specifically for those of us who are, I call them foot soldiers, on the ground every day, doing some things for our loved ones that will change your life, the way that you look at personal sovereignty, grace, the medical system, and the way that people, specifically seniors, are treated in this country. It's a lot, and it can create a lot of PTSD and trauma, even as the caregiver. So I want to acknowledge that, and I want to lift up a book actually that I might have close to me on my shelf here. It's a book.
It's a lot on that shelf.
It's a book called Elderhood, which has really changed. It's sort of changed my life as a caregiver, because even though my dad isn't here, my mom still is. And the book is by
Yeah.
a geriatrician. And I love that. She's a geriatrician, and her name is Louise Aronson. Check it out. If you're somebody who's a caregiver or you're somebody in the aging community, this book will change your thought process. And this lady, I don't know her, so she's not paying me or nothing to say this, about the way we look at medical care for seniors in the
Yeah.
United States of America. It's a great resource to have. Um, just a couple other things, and then I'm gonna let you go, Morgan. But you, in the book, you mentioned not letting your pain go to waste. How exactly how do you put that? Not letting your
No
pain be.
pain.
What is it?
No pain. No pain is ever wasted.
What do you mean by that?
And I believe that strongly. Um, I just feel like there's whatever you go through is not for naught, you know. Um, the best demonstration of that for me is, like I said, the story of Joseph in the Bible. You know, he was second in command in his father's house. When he was sold into slavery, he was second in command in the general's house. He was wrongfully accused and sent to prison. He wound up being second in command in the jail. And then ultimately his purpose was to be second command for all of Egypt, um, to help save not only the people who enslaved him, but his brothers who sold him into slavery. And for me, that's just such an amazing demonstration. And that's how detailed for me God is, in the sense of like he went through all these painful situations, but even in that there was a training ground that was very specific to his final purpose and positioning. Like, you were second in command 3 times before your final. And so I find solace in like, okay, wow, I was gifted in poetry, gifted in acting. I suffered with depression. I suffered with self-harm. I started writing. I majored in social work. I majored in education. And now I put out a book and a workbook that brings all those things together. And so I feel like when we are given the space or the resources or the support to really step back and like look at the patterns of our lives, we'll find that we can find, as I have found, that it's all training ground for the official offering that you have been charged to give the world.
That's amazing. Yeah. Say that one more time. Don't The pain is never what?
No pain is ever wasted.
No pain is ever wasted.
Pain is ever wasted.
No
Yeah.
pain is
And I
ever.
signed many of the books with that too. No pain is ever wasted. And
That's
then the other thing that I signed the book with was, don't deny the world your story. So
There you go. There you go. And this is just the story, like a little smidget of this Black woman's story and Morgan, who is another Black woman,
yeah.
her story, right? So Black women are not a monolith. There are so many
Yes.
of us
Thank you.
with different experiences. So we are not by any means speaking
Right.
for all Black women. I can only speak for myself, and I'm sure Morgan, you would agree. You can only speak for yourself. And so we are so nuanced, we have different experiences, we speak different languages, we come from different places, we have different even skin tone experiences, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like Black women are
Yep.
so just, we're so dynamic,
Diverse.
so different, you know, even with our own community. But when
Yeah.
I say Black women, I'm not speaking for all of us, but there's, you know, there's me and maybe another one can relate to me out there. And even if you're not a Black woman, you know, perhaps you can find some pieces of this conversation that have lifted you up and inspired you. I think
Yeah.
if I would just talk about like my sort of dream though for Black women and women of color, you know, I and for specifically the kids that I teach, I always encourage them to travel the world. I personally don't know any Black woman that's been to all 7 continents. So that's my like personal goal. I want to go to all 7 continents,
Antarctica.
all of them.
Woo.
I'm going to every single before I leave this earth.
I believe it.
I'm going to all 7 continents. And another thing that I want to say that I feel like I don't hear enough, and maybe just because they're not making me part of the conversation, but I don't hear enough about Black women. And again, I don't know where those stories are taking place on stage with Black women falling madly, deeply in love. Okay. And I am prepared to create that story in my own personal life and to then write about it because I'm writing a TV pilot.
Yeah.
And this girl is gonna have the most. It's complicated sometimes, but eventually I can tell you. Spoiler alert: the main character is going to be madly, deeply, authentically
Mhm.
in love because I just don't
Yeah.
see enough of those stories centered around Black women. I mean,
Well, to that piece,
huh?
yes. Well, to that piece, you know, this book is 200 pages about. It was going to be 300, but I removed the section on love. So there will be a book in the future uh, about a full book of about a 100-page book on and commentary on my experiences with love and loss. And yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
no, we us Black women, we fall hard. This Black woman, I mean, I speak for all. Some Black women's like, I don't fall. I
Somebody said
fall
that. I don't be
I
falling.
fall hard. I fall quick. I don't fall out quick. So yeah,
Yeah, and even I'm gonna tell you something about the artist formerly known as Robo Sam. Like I am a romantic, okay? I'm a romantic. I think you have to be a theater director in many ways. You have to be a romantic, not just romance between, you know, two people in
hmm
this sort of dating space or a couple space, but you have to be a romantic just in general. I believe you have to believe in magic and fantasy and imagination and all of that. But in my personal life, I'm the same. I love romance. And you know, I'm again excited about seeing more people writing about that on stage and in movies and on streaming services because Black women do like
yeah,
to fall in love and talk about it and be in it and all of that. um
yeah,
yeah, so I thought it might be sort of not I don't know if this is fun. I shouldn't say fun, but for me, I
yeah.
will
It
say
should be.
affirming to be able to every
Yeah,
morning. You know how we were talking about grief and in depression and self-harm and anything,
yeah.
you know, every day is different. And the thing about this exercise here, let me see if I can get it in here. Let me take off my
I can
little,
also show it too. The color wheel.
yeah, the emotional color wheel. The thing that I love about this exercise in particular that Morgan created in the workbook. And how much is the workbook, Morgan? How much, if somebody wants to buy the book, how much is it? If they only want to buy the workbook, how much is it? And it's a bundle too,
Uh,
right?
yes, the book is 19.99. The workbook is 24.99, and the bundle is 39.99. So it's a $5 discount.
Yeah. And so, and how much are if they want to purchase the poems spoken on like on Spotify or Apple, how much is a download? Like,
So if you have Spotify, you have your subscriptions. If on Amazon and iTunes, it should be 12.99 for the regular album, and then there's a commentary app. I always got commentary. Then there's a commentary album for 14.99.
yeah. So if you're looking for something to do, on the weekend and this summer, something to, because not only are the poems good, I feel like they're rhythmic, they're in verse.
Yeah, it's a
Most of them are in
performance
verse.
poetry album. Yeah, so I'm performing the poems. I'm not just reading them.
Yeah, and Morgan writes in verse, y'all. Just I mean, you do. You write in verse.
I didn't know that. I didn't
Yeah.
know
So,
that.
so the
I didn't know
emotional color wheel, which I actually did this morning, is I do it most mornings, not every morning. Sometimes I read the Bible or I
that. Yeah,
or I pray. But
yeah.
this morning I just did the I didn't pray this morning, but I did the emotional
I
color
don't know
wheel.
if I would share that.
Morgan, can you just and I'm just following along. It's not a long sort of the directions are super
No, it's
short for
not.
every exercise.
Yeah.
Is it okay if we just read the top part?
Yeah.
You
So
want to
I
read?
just, yeah. So it says, I wrote, in my experiences with depression, there were many times that I could not explain how I felt. Many times I felt numb or I felt sad, but I couldn't explain why. As I began to heal, I learned how important it was for me to be more specific in describing my feelings. The more I did this, I got better at figuring out how I was feeling. This helped me get better at figuring out why I was feeling a certain way. This ultimately helped me to better advocate for myself and helped others to support me better. So below is the color wheel. You can always create your own or print these off. You can use the one in the book. And basically for each color, what you would go through, and this is just an example, so you don't have to have excited for yellow, but you just think about how do these colors make me feel? What is my initial reaction to them? You can also find color wheels where these colors are already preset if that feels like it's less anxiety ridden for you, and then you fill these colors out, and of course it's your color wheel, so you can change the colors or the feelings anytime you want to. And then the other part, which I feel is a little key, is the color wheel check-ins, and there should be 7 of these for every day of the week. If you wanted to make a copy of it and then just have them each day, or just write in your journal, and it's just a prompting to have you fill it in. So like you see today, my color is, and you would write the color that you selected, which means I feel, and then you would say the what you put into the color, and then think about why, and maybe you leave that blank, but it's just a prompting outside of yourself to think about, what's going on inside of yourself.
I think
Another resource oh, go ahead, Sam.
no, go. What were you gonna say? Another who?
I'll just say I'll provide it. There's a book called How We Love by, I don't know, that it's Milan and, yes, Kurvich, something Yurkovich. And they have free resources on their website, and one of them is called the Soul Words List,
Mhm.
which I think is a great resource for this. And how it's organized is, we have those basic happy, glad, sad, mad, but it gives a list of more nuanced words so that you can you can use that happy, sad, mad as a starting point, but you can kind of get more specific in your description of your feelings, which I love it. A friend introduced it to me, so I'll include that so people can access that link as well.
Okay, and all of those links and resources that Morgan was talking about are going to be in the description for the for this interview as it appears on YouTube. So, and the links will be there. There'll be live links, so you can just click on them to get to them quickly. Again, we're not endorsing these organizations nor these
Right.
resources, but just making it available to you to then decipher whether this is a thing, a resource, a tool, an asset that you can use as you make your personal journey through, depression, grief, whatever experience you're having at this time. And I'll say for the color wheel, as somebody who this is like a personal testimony outside of the author. It's, I even though I kind of wrote on this one because I was writing on it as Morgan was speaking about it, I'll just have the color. I just write the current colors in my journal and then look at the color
Hmm.
wheel, assess it, and but write it out in my journal because my journal, I'm a journal person. I'm going to say a journalist. I am a journalist, but I'm a
You
person who
are a
always uses journals. You can also do it that way.
journaler.
Journaler. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Morgan said, you can add a color to it if you want to, because sometimes I add black when I'm feeling like I live in a deep dark abyss, like truly.
Hmm.
And what it does, if you do it in the morning, I'm going to advocate, you can do it whenever you want, but in the mornings, what I found is once, instead of just having an emotion, experiencing it without being present with it, you can assess how you're feeling without judgment. You know exactly where you are, to then, as somebody again with high functioning depression, I know exactly, because of the color wheel, I know where I am for the day and I know how to manage it because I know what's happening.
And communicate it to other people. That silent suffering, that we talked about of like, hey, I'm just, or, it doesn't have to always just be, I'm just feeling confused today. It could be, I'm just really excited. I don't know why. I woke up excited, so you're just getting a lot of excited energy.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for saying that, Morgan. Yeah, Morgan is a, let me tell you, Michiganders, Michiganians, United States of Americans, global viewers, whoever happens to tune in to this podcast. And again, this has been the Power Hour with Shakespeare in Detroit. How fortunate are we? How blessed are we? We need to consider ourselves. We need to retain artists like this, but that's another podcast for another day. Because
Yeah.
because the fact that we even have her here, and I'm not just saying this because she's my friend, because I sort of, not sort of, I pride myself on being an honest person, even if she wasn't my friend and I know her like that, and I only knew her work. What a gift to have Morgan and people like Morgan, because there's not many in the world like her, but to have her specifically in Michigan is a gift. So if you're somebody, no matter where you are in these United States or around the globe, who believes in supporting local artists, people who have been brave enough to stay in the Midwest, because I think it takes a special type of person to stay in the Midwest and not go to New York or LA, support local artists. And if you're like, well, I don't need these resources for myself, I'm good. Somebody in your life does. So you can make it a gift. In fact, you can buy these as early Christmas gifts and then
Hmm.
give it to that person that needs a wonderful tool or resource during the holiday season. Because again, it's for the book is $24.99, the workbook is $19.99, and if you want to get it in a bundle, I suggest the bundle for $39.99. Right? Did I get that
Yeah,
right?
the reverse. Yeah,
Oh,
the
was it the
book
right?
is 19.99, and then the workbook is 24.99.
But the
But you
bundle is
got it.
$39.99.
Yep, the
How
bundle
much
is
is this
39.
shirt?
The t-shirts are 25, and then the crew
That's
necks
it.
are, yeah,
Wow. Did you
not
$25?
including shipping and handling. Not including shipping and handling.
And it has stretch in it for those of us who want, you see that? Y'all see that?
Yeah,
It has the
yeah.
stretch in
We
it for
have crew
those of us.
necks and hoodies. Yeah,
How much is the hoodie?
the hoodie is 45,
That's
and
it.
then the crew neck is 35, not including shipping and handling.
Not including shipping and handling, but what a deal for supporting an artist and also a mission that is really going to help a lot of people, I believe. And also you get to wear something cool, with it has a little bit of
Yeah.
stretch in it. I love it. Well,
Yeah. And
anyway,
if you buy a shirt, hashtag us on Instagram, heal.b.live.llc, so we can feature you on our page.
so what are your handles? What are your social media handles? Name them.
Uh, on 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 Facebook, we're HealBeLive LLC. On Instagram, we are heal.b.live.llc. And then our website is healbelive.com.
And Morgan, can people follow you personally, or you're not up for that? I mean, because look, I don't let nobody follow me on my personal page. Don't y'all even try.
I'm not that interesting. No, yeah, just follow He'll Be Live.
Follow Hillbilly.
Not
Okay.
interesting. I just,
Okay. Well, listen, Morgan. I'll probably tell you. Well, I'll talk to you offline. But for the
yeah.
for the for the purposes of this great conversation, this really was everything that I hoped it could be. Again, everybody, we could go on and on about
Yeah.
it's sort of our journeys, because it's a lifelong journey we're still experiencing, but for now we're going to leave it there. Maybe in the future I'll have Morgan back on, because she's doing incredible
Yeah.
work and I'm just trying to keep up with her, because she really is impacting the world in really in amazing
Uh,
ways. The Witch. Make sure he'll be live to learn more about The Witch. That's W period
I,
I period T period C period H period. Morgan, what were you gonna say?
I just want to thank you for having me. I've officially arrived. Finally got an invitation to the Power 15 podcast. And I just want to thank you. What I respect and appreciate about you, Sam, is that you are not someone who just talks your walk, you walk it. And so um, I've been humbled many times in conversation with you of when I'm unraveling and you just kind of help me. You give me the freedom to be in that space, and then you give me a truth to hold on to, and I think that I'm able to hold on to it a little bit more because I actually see you walking in that truth. So I just thank you for always creating a space for me to be myself, both personally and professionally. And I know it's not easy being a trailblazer, uh, but you do it, and it feels like you've been charged to do that. And I appreciate you going before me, um, and so many other Black women, because to know someone is doing it and to know that the road hasn't been easy, but you somehow find a way to keep pressing through, even through the commitment to your parents and your process, like, you know, I'm just humbled. So thank you for being you, and thank you for the honor of being a part of your life, you know. So
Wow, more. All right, I can see now that now I'm gonna have to pause this video or stop this video. Thank you, Morgan.
okay.
I didn't want to end with me, but thank you, Morgan.
It's like,
Thank you for saying all that. You know, it means
yeah.
like a lot to me. Y'all don't know this, but Morgan knows this. I don't plan on being around publicly for a long time, but I am here for, as one of my favorite UFC fighters says, a good time. So I'm not here for a long time, but I'm here for a good time, and I want to make as much positive impact as I can while I'm here before I, live that good old farm life somewhere in rural. Truly. So thank you. Thanks, Morgan, for being here. Thank you, folks,
Woohoo!
who watched the Power, because this was a special episode, the Power Hour. If you haven't,
Power hour
the
and a
Power
half.
Power Hour, no, we could talk a lot. So I'm gonna stop it here.
Power hour hour. The
Thank
power hour hour.
Thank you for watching the Power Hour hours, the Power Hours, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Shakespeare in Detroit's YouTube page. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.